The city buzzed around Elena as she walked down the busy street, her heels clicking rhythmically on the pavement. She paused momentarily, a shiver creeping down her spine, her breath visible in the cool evening air. She reached into her coat pocket, fingers brushing the photograph, a hidden relic of her past. For a brief moment, she let herself wonder, could she ever outrun what was buried inside her? As she continued walking, the city lights flickered, casting fleeting shadows. Elena reached her office, a modest but comforting space she'd designed for others to feel safe. Yet, it had never truly felt like home to her. She opened the door, the soft glow of her desk lamp greeting her. Another day, another session. She sat down staring at her reflection in the glass. On the outside, she had it all together, confident, composed, the well-respected psychologist who helped others overcome their darkest fears. But beneath the surface, her own traumas festered, unspoken and raw. Elena's eyes flicked to the framed picture on her desk, a photo of a woman whose face she could barely remember, a person she used to know, a wound hidden from the world. Elena took a deep breath, pulling herself together. It was time to face another patient. Dante stood backstage, feeling the familiar weight of anxiety in his chest. The crowd's hum grew louder as the seconds ticked by, his heartbeat syncing with the rhythmic beat of the room. He adjusted his guitar, his fingers trembling ever so slightly. His reputation as a captivating musician had earned him a loyal following, but underneath the image of a successful performer, Dante was a man running from something. Something he couldn't escape. The lights blazed on him, casting long shadows across the stage. His voice rang out into the room, smooth and deep, carrying the weight of emotions he had long since tried to bury. The song was about guilt, loss, and regret, things he knew all too well. Each note he sang felt like it was tearing a little more of him open. As the last note echoed through the venue, Dante's gaze flicked across the crowd. And then it stopped. On a woman standing at the bar, eyes fixed on him. There was something in her look, a kind of unspoken understanding. Dante's breath caught in his throat, and for a moment he forgot where he was. He couldn't shake the feeling that they shared something, some invisible thread connecting them, pulling them closer. The crowd erupted in applause, but Dante's attention was still locked on her. He didn't know why, but something about her presence made his chest tighten, with an unfamiliar mix of longing and fear. He quickly turned away, hoping to shake the feeling, but it wouldn't leave him. Later that night, after the performance, Elena stood at the bar nursing a drink. She hadn't planned on coming to this show, but something about the venue's intimate atmosphere had drawn her in. And then there was Dante. He had captivated her. From the moment he stepped on stage, his music resonating deep inside her. She tried to dismiss it, but the pull she felt toward him was undeniable. It had been a long time since anyone had made her feel like this, so seen, so understood. Dante approached her, and her heart skipped a beat. He didn't smile at first, but there was an intensity in his gaze that caught her off guard. "You were watching me during the show," Dante said, his voice low and a little husky. "Something on your mind?" Elena was caught off guard by his directness. She hesitated for a moment before replying, Maybe I was just trying to find something I've been missing." His eyes didn't leave hers as he took a step closer. The air around them seemed to thicken with the unspoken words hanging between them. "Do you ever feel like you're hiding something from the world?" Dante asked, his voice laced with a sadness that seemed out of place for someone so confident on stage. Elena's breath caught. She didn't want to answer, didn't want to show him how much she recognized the truth in his words, but somehow she couldn't help herself. She wasn't used to being so open with people, especially not with someone she had just met. "I think everyone hides something," she said softly, her gaze falling to her glass. "But some things are harder to hide than others." He studied her for a moment, as though trying to figure her out. "I've got my own things to hide," he said, leaning in slightly. "But sometimes it's easier to run from them than face them." Elena's heart pounded in her chest. She didn't know why she was telling him this, but something in his words made her feel like she wasn't alone. She looked back up at him, locking eyes. "I help people confront their fears," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "but I've never been able to face my own." Dante's expression softened, and for the first time since they'd met, he smiled, a sad, knowing smile. I get that. It's easier to help others, right? But when it's your turn to open up, it's terrifying. Elena swallowed hard. There was something in his voice that resonated deep within her. She wondered if he knew how much he'd just revealed about himself. But then again, wasn't that why they were both here, to share the things they couldn't say to anyone else? Her thoughts were interrupted when Dante suddenly broke the silence. "You're a therapist, right?" he asked, his tone thoughtful. "Ever tried being on the other side of the couch?" Elena blinked, taken aback by his question. She hadn't expected him to be so blunt. "What do you mean?" He chuckled softly, a mix of bitterness and self-awareness in his voice. "I'm asking if you've ever let someone help you. Really help you?" The question hit her harder than she expected. She looked at him, searching his face for signs of judgment, but found none. Only a quiet understanding. "Not really," she admitted, her voice cracking just a little. "I guess I'm too scared to let anyone in." Dante nodded slowly, his expression softening. "I get it. But maybe we can help each other." If you're hooked on this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what secrets you're hiding beneath the surface. Your thoughts are what keep stories like this alive. Hit that notification bell to stay updated. The next few days passed in a blur for Elena. She tried to focus on her work, on her patients, but Dante's words kept echoing in her mind. Maybe we can help each other. She hadn't been able to shake the feeling that something was happening between them, something she didn't understand. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this way, so open, so vulnerable. But as much as she wanted to deny it, she felt a pull toward him, a gravity she couldn't explain. One evening, after another, long day of seeing patients, Elena walked into her office to find a message waiting for her. It was from Dante. "I know this might be a little crazy, but I can't stop thinking about our conversation. If you're open to it, maybe we could talk more. No therapy, no judgment. Just two people who get what it's like to carry the weight of the world on their shoulders." Her heart skipped a beat as she stared at the message. Should I? The question lingered in her mind. She had always kept her personal life separate from her work, but something about Dante made her want to break that rule. After a long pause, she typed out a reply. "I don't usually do this, but I'd like that." She hit send before she could second guess herself. Later that night, they met at a small cafe in the city. The place was quiet, with only a few patrons scattered around, their voices low and distant. Elena walked in first, glancing around nervously. She had no idea what this meeting was supposed to be. Was it just a friendly conversation? Or was it something more? Her mind was racing, but she didn't want to show it. Dante was already there, sitting in a corner booth, his guitar case propped against the chair beside him. He looked up as Elena walked in, a small smile spreading across his face. For a moment, he just watched her, his gaze intense and unreadable. Elena walked over to the booth and slid into the seat across from him. She noticed the guitar case, and a part of her felt an inexplicable warmth. Music had always been his way of speaking when words weren't enough. "Thanks for meeting me," Dante said, his voice low but steady. "I wasn't sure if you'd show." Elena hesitated before responding. "I wasn't sure either, but something told me I should." He nodded as though he understood exactly what she meant. "Yeah, I felt it too." There was a moment of silence, an awkward tension that neither of them seemed to know how to break. Then Dante spoke again, his voice softer this time. "You know, I've been thinking about what you said the other night, about how we all have things we hide, and I realized I don't know if I can keep running anymore." Elena's heart clenched at the raw vulnerability in his voice. She had never heard him sound so defeated. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze steady on him. "You don't have to keep running, Dante," she said quietly. "But it's not easy to face those things. The things we try to bury deep down. It takes a lot of courage." Dante looked at her, his eyes searching hers for something. "I don't know if I have that courage, Elena. Sometimes it feels easier to keep running, to keep pretending like everything's okay." Elena swallowed, feeling a deep empathy for him. She understood that fear all too well. It was the same fear she had been running from for years, the fear of letting go, of facing what had happened. I know what you mean, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm scared too, but maybe it's time we stop running. The words hung in the air, charged with the weight of everything they hadn't said to each other. Elena felt a strange sense of peace wash over her, as though speaking those words had lifted a weight from her chest. Dante shifted in his seat, his fingers tapping lightly on the table. He seemed lost in thought for a moment, then spoke again, his voice hesitant. You're right, but I don't know where to start. Elena smiled gently, trying to reassure him. Maybe we don't need to have all the answers right now. Maybe it's just about taking the first step, together. Dante looked at her, his eyes softening. There was something vulnerable in the way he looked at her now, something raw and real. For the first time, Elena saw beyond the facade he had so carefully built around himself. She saw a man who was just as broken as she was, and somehow that made her feel a little less alone. I'd like that, he said quietly. I'd like to take that first step with you. The conversation shifted after that, becoming lighter, more comfortable. They talked about their lives, their dreams, their fears. Elena learned about Dante's past, how he had once been on top of the world only to lose everything in a single moment, how he turned to music to cope. But even that couldn't heal the wounds that ran deep. She shared her own story with him, carefully choosing what to reveal, but feeling a strange sense of relief in doing so. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was holding herself back, like she was protecting some fragile wall that she had built over the years. With Dante, she felt like she could just breathe. As the night went on, the conversation became more effortless, and for the first time in a long while, Elena allowed herself to feel something other than fear. There was a strange warmth that seemed to envelop them both, and though neither of them said it aloud, they both knew that something had shifted between them. The days that followed their meeting were filled with a strange, quiet anticipation. Elena found herself thinking about Dante more often than she cared to admit. The connection between them had felt real, raw, and unspoken. She hadn't allowed herself to be this open with anyone in years, but there was something about him that made her feel like she could finally let down her guard. It wasn't just his music that had drawn her in, it was the way he looked at her, as though he saw the things she had kept buried for so long, the things no one else had ever noticed. Dante, too, couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Each conversation they had felt like peeling back another layer of both their lives. He was more than willing to talk about his past, the mistakes that haunted him, the guilt that weighed heavily on his chest. But it was Elena, her quiet strength, the depth in her, eyes that kept him coming back. He found himself wanting to know more about her, to learn what had caused the cracks in her perfectly composed exterior. But he was also afraid of what would happen if she allowed him to see too much. It was a Thursday evening when they met again, this time at Elena's office. Dante had insisted on meeting her there, away from the noise of the city, where they could talk without distractions. Elena had agreed, though part of her felt unsure. A therapist's office wasn't exactly the most casual setting for a conversation with someone you were starting to care about. But as Dante walked in, his eyes scanning the room, there was a certain calmness that settled over her. The kind that only came when she was around him. She smiled, a soft curve of her lips. Thanks for coming, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. He sat down, his usual easy demeanor replaced by something more serious, more intense. It was clear he wanted to talk about something, but he wasn't sure where to begin. I don't know why, but there's something about this place that makes it feel like, I don't know, like this is the right time, he said, his fingers fidgeting with the strap of his guitar case, which he had brought in with him. Elena tilted her head, studying him. The right time for what? To finally talk about the things I've been running from, Dante admitted, his voice steady but with a tremor underneath. I can't keep pretending like everything's fine when it's not. Elena's breath caught in her throat. This was it. The moment they had both been avoiding. The moment when they would truly open up to each other. No more walls between them. Dante, Elena began, but she faltered. She wasn't sure how to encourage him to keep going. Sometimes people needed to come to their own truths in their own time. He leaned forward, eyes locked on hers. I've heard a lot of people, Elena. And I've spent so much time running away from the consequences, but I can't run anymore. Not from myself, not from you. Elena's heart raced. There was something in his eyes now, an openness, a rawness, that made her feel exposed too. She knew that feeling well. You don't have to run, Dante, not from me, she whispered, her voice barely audible. But you have to face your truth, whatever it is. For a long moment, the air between them felt thick with unspoken words. Dante closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. And then he began to speak, his voice low and almost apologetic. I was in a relationship. It was the kind of thing I thought I'd never get out of. I thought it was love. But really? It was just me being scared of being alone. I hurt her. I let her down in ways I can't even begin to explain. The pain in his voice struck Elena deeply. She could see it, feel it, this shame he was carrying. But what broke her heart even more was the fact that he was trying to confess, to come clean. I'm sorry, Dante whispered, his eyes searching hers. I should have done better. I should have been better. Elena swallowed the lump in her throat. She wasn't sure what to say, how to offer comfort to a man who had never let anyone in before, but she knew one thing. She wasn't going to let him carry this alone. You've taken the first step, Dante, she said gently. Facing what you've done, being honest with yourself about it, that's the hardest part. Dante nodded, his eyes dropping to the floor as he absorbed her words. There was a moment of silence between them, and then Elena spoke again, her voice steady, but filled with a tenderness she couldn't quite hide. What about you, Elena? He asked quietly, almost cautiously. What have you been running from? The question hung in the air, and for a split second Elena froze. She had known this moment would come. She had known that one day Dante would ask her to reveal her own secrets. She exhaled slowly, her fingers gripping the edge of her desk as if grounding herself to the reality of this moment. Could she really tell him? But as she looked at him, sitting there vulnerable and raw, she realized that maybe it was time. Time to stop hiding, time to face the past that had shaped her. She took a deep breath, her voice barely a whisper. I lost someone I loved deeply, and I never really recovered from it. I just buried it. And now it's been years, and I don't know how to stop running. Dante's eyes softened as he listened, his expression a mixture of sympathy and understanding. He didn't say anything for a moment, just let her words hang in the air between them. Thank you for telling me, he said quietly. That's more than I ever expected you to say. Elena nodded, feeling a sense of relief she hadn't realized she needed. For the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe. Again. If you've been touched by this story, hit that like button, comment, and share your thoughts. What's the hardest truth you've ever had to face? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. This journey is far from over. The silence that followed felt comfortable in its own way, the kind of silence that comes from two people who no longer feel the need to fill the air with words. Elena and Dante sat across from each other, the weight of their shared vulnerability settling between them. It was as though a barrier had finally been broken, one that neither of them had known existed until that very moment. But it wasn't enough to just talk about the past. Elena knew that, and so did Dante. They both knew that the real work, the healing, would only begin when they took that first step into the unknown, when they dared to trust each other with the pieces of themselves they had kept hidden for so long. I think we both know there's no going back. Now, Dante said, his voice breaking the silence. His eyes were steady, his gaze fixed on Elena's face. We've opened doors we can't close. Elena nodded, feeling a strange sense of peace wash over her. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from everything being perfect. No, it was the kind of peace that came from knowing you didn't have to carry everything alone anymore. No, there's no going back, she agreed softly. But maybe that's not such a bad thing. Dante leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. He let out a slow breath, as if releasing the tension that had built up over the years. I've spent so much of my life running from things, Elena. From the things I've done, from the mistakes I've made. But I think maybe it's time to stop running. To face everything. To face myself. Elena looked at him, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and something deeper. There was something about Dante's willingness to confront his demons that made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she could do the same. I think I'm ready to stop running too, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Over the next few weeks, Elena and Dante continued to meet, sometimes at her office, sometimes at small quiet cafes around the city. They didn't talk about everything all at once. Instead, they took their time, peeling back the layers slowly at their own pace. Each conversation was another step forward, another moment where they trusted each other just a little bit more. Dante's music had taken on a new meaning. He wrote songs now not just to perform, but to release the emotions that had been pent up inside him for so long. And Elena? She started to feel lighter, as though the burden she had been carrying all these years was slowly being lifted, one conversation at a time. But it wasn't always easy. There were moments of doubt, times when one of them would pull back, afraid of getting too close, afraid of being hurt again. But those moments were fleeting. With every step they took, their bond grew stronger. And with every piece of themselves they revealed, they both realized something. They weren't just healing separately. They were healing together. One evening, as they sat in Elena's office, Dante handed her a small notebook. "What's this?" she asked, raising an eyebrow as she flipped through the pages. "It's something I've been working on," he said, his voice quiet but filled with a quiet confidence. "A song. For us." Elena looked up at him, her eyes softening. "For us?" Dante smiled, but it wasn't the usual smile she had come to expect. This one was different. It was filled with warmth and something more, something deeper. "Yeah," he said, his voice steady. "It's about everything we've been through, about the things we've faced and the things we're still learning to face." Elena felt a lump form in her throat as she read the first few lines. The lyrics were raw, honest, and vulnerable in ways that made her feel like he had taken the very essence of their journey and turned it into music. Music that wasn't just for him, but for her too. "I love it," she whispered, her eyes glistening with emotion. Dante reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. For a moment, they just sat there, hands intertwined, the silence between them filled with understanding. "I'm glad," he said softly, "because it's for you, for us." As the weeks turned into months, Elena and Dante's bond deepened. They faced their individual demons together, supporting each other in ways they never thought possible. They talked about everything, the past, the present, and the future. There were still scars, still moments of doubt, but there was also something stronger now, trust. Trust in each other, trust in themselves. And one night, as the city slept beneath a blanket of stars, Dante and Elena sat together, on the roof of her apartment building overlooking the skyline. The night air was cool, and the world around them felt quiet and still. "I think we've both come a long way," Dante said, his voice barely a whisper as he looked at Elena. She smiled, the warmth of his words filling her heart. "We have," she agreed. "And I'm not running anymore. Not from you, not from myself." Dante's gaze softened as he looked at her, his hand reaching out to gently tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "You don't have to run, Elena, not anymore." Elena leaned into his touch, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had spent so much of her life hiding, pretending that everything was fine. But with Dante, she didn't have to hide anymore. With him, she could finally be herself. And for the first time in a long time, Elena knew she was ready to face whatever came next, together. If you've made it this far, hit that like button and let us know what you thought about Elena and Dante's journey. What truths have you faced in your own life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. This story is only just beginning.